There were 56,000 people in Dodger Stadium that night, and Michael Jackson was watching one of them. July 6, 1984, Los Angeles. The opening night of the Victory Tour, the largest production the Jackson family had ever assembled, the most anticipated concert event of the year, a show that had sold out in hours and generated more press coverage in its first week of ticket sales than most tours generate across their entire run. 56,000 people had come to Dodger Stadium not simply to see a concert, but to be present at something they sensed, without quite knowing why, would not happen again in quite this form. They were right. It wouldn't. And 20 minutes into the first night, something happened that nobody, not the crew, not the brothers, not the production team that had spent months preparing every second of this show, had planned for or could have planned for. Because it depended entirely on one man's capacity to find a single face inside 56,000. The Victory Tour had arrived carrying a particular kind of weight. The years since Off the Wall had changed Michael Jackson in ways that the public was still catching up with. Thriller had not simply sold, it had restructured what selling meant, had redefined what a pop album could do to a culture. By the summer of 1984, Michael was operating at an altitude that had very few precedents in the history of popular music, and the Victory Tour was supposed to be the live confirmation of everything the records had established. The production was enormous. The staging was elaborate. The preparation had been meticulous beyond what most touring operations ever attempted. Every element had been controlled, rehearsed, calibrated. The show was designed to be airtight. What nobody in the production could control was what Michael actually did once the lights came up. From his earliest performances, the Apollo Theater at age 11, the television appearances in matching outfits and synchronized choreography, the nights in Motown ballrooms when Joseph Jackson stood in the wings and watched his sons learn to hold a crowd, Michael had possessed something that veteran performers recognized immediately and rarely found words for. Not energy, not technique, not charisma, though he had all of those things. What he had was attention, a specific, active, unrelenting awareness of the individual human beings in the room with him. He did not perform at audiences, he performed into them, finding specific faces, responding to specific reactions, calibrating the distance between himself and a particular person in the third row in the same moment that he was executing choreography that required complete physical precision. The two things happened simultaneously. Nobody who worked with him in those early years could fully explain how. By 1984, performing for 56,000 people had changed the geometry of that awareness without changing its nature. The faces were farther away. The individual reactions were harder to read, but the attention was still there, still active, still looking. Those who spent time near Michael during the Bad and Victory Tour eras described something that struck them as unusual in a performer at that level of fame, that he seemed genuinely interested in who was in the room. Not in the collective energy of the audience as a force, though that interested him too, but in the specific people who made up that force. A man in the fourth row who wasn't screaming. A woman near the back who had closed her eyes. A child doing something unexpected. That evening, Tommy Reeves was 8 years old. He lived in Inglewood, about 4 miles from Dodger Stadium, and he had spent the 3 months since his father bought the tickets doing something that his father would later describe, with the particular warmth of a parent who has watched something inexplicable happen, as practicing. Not performing, not dancing for anyone, practicing, alone in the living room, with the records playing, working through the footwork and the arm positions and the weight shifts, with the focused repetition of a child who has decided that something matters and is going to get it right. His father, Raymond Reeves, had watched this and said very little. He recognized it as something beyond enthusiasm, something closer to a calling, though he didn't use that word at the time. They had floor seats toward the side, maybe 30 feet from the stage. When the show began, Tommy stood in front of his father and watched. The brothers came out. The production filled the stadium with light and sound. The crowd around him, adults mostly, teenagers, people who had been waiting for this night for months, erupted in the way that stadium crowds erupt when something long anticipated finally arrives. Tommy Reeves did not erupt. He watched. And then, without appearing to notice that he was doing it, he began to move. Not performing, not showing anyone. His attention was entirely on the stage. What his body was doing was something separate from intention, a response so immediate and complete that it looked less like imitation than translation, like a signal being received and expressed simultaneously. His feet found the rhythm. His arms found the positions. The weight shifted the way Michael's weight shifted, a fraction of a second behind, the way a shadow moves. His father noticed. The people immediately around them noticed. A woman to Raymond's left leaned slightly toward her companion and said something without taking her eyes off the boy. Nobody moved toward Tommy. Nobody spoke to him. There was something in what he was doing that communicated without words that it was private, that interrupting it would be the wrong thing, the way interrupting someone deep in prayer would be the wrong thing. It was the kind of thing you watch without interrupting. On the stage, 20 minutes into the first set, during a moment in the performance when Michael was moving toward the front of the stage and scanning the crowd with the particular quality of focus that those who knew him recognized as genuine-looking rather than performance-looking, he stopped. Not a choreographed stop. The band continued for 2 bars. His brothers continued. The production around him, the lights, the sound, the enormous machinery of the largest tour the family had ever mounted, continued moving forward. Michael did not. He was standing at the front of the stage, and he was looking at something in the crowd, and he was very still. There is a specific quality to a performer going still in the middle of a production that is still running. The lights continuing to move, the sound continuing to fill the space, the rest of the show proceeding as designed around a center that has simply stopped. It is not the same as a mistake. It does not read as a mistake. It reads as decision, as someone who has seen something and decided that what they have seen is more important than what they were doing. The crew saw it first. The stage manager, positioned in the wings, initially assumed a monitor issue, that Michael's in-ear feed had cut out, or that something in the stage had given him a signal to stop. He checked the board. Everything was running. He looked back at the stage. Michael had not moved. His brothers had noticed now. Jackie glanced over. Tito adjusted without breaking the choreography. The music continued, waiting. What Michael had seen from the front of that stage, in the middle of 56,000 people, was a small boy standing perfectly still while everyone around him moved, doing the same thing Michael was doing, the same arm, the same weight, the same position, and not knowing he was doing it. He crouched at the edge of the stage. The drop from the stage to the floor was significant. He went to his knees, then lower, until he was at eye level with the front section. A security detail moved without being asked, creating a small, clear path. Michael reached out, not grabbing, not pulling, and pointed directly at Tommy Reeves. The boy looked up. He had not been watching Michael watch him. He had been watching the stage, the performance, the thing that had occupied him entirely for the last 20 minutes. When Michael pointed at him, Tommy did not scream. He did not cry. He did not reach for his father. He looked at Michael Jackson, at the man who had been playing in his living room for 3 months, and looked back in the way that children sometimes look when they recognize something without having words for what the recognition means. Michael said something. No microphone, no amplification. The crowd around them was loud enough that the words did not carry more than a few feet. Raymond Reeves, standing directly behind his son, heard it. What Michael said, Raymond would describe to people for the rest of his life, always with the same careful pause before the words, always in the same quiet voice. "I saw you. You've got it." He straightened up, turned back to the band, raised his hand, and started the song again from the beginning. The band came in, the brothers reset. The production ran back to the top of the number without a word of explanation over any microphone, without any announcement to the crowd, without any acknowledgement that something had happened. To the 56,000 people in Dodger Stadium, it looked, from most angles, like a decision, a choice to restart, an artistic call. Some of them didn't notice anything had stopped. Some of them noticed and assumed a technical issue. Very few were close enough to see what had actually occurred. Raymond Reeves was one of them. When the song started again, he put his hand on his son's shoulder. Tommy turned around. His face, his father would later say, was not the face of a child who had just been acknowledged by his idol. It was something quieter than that, something that took Raymond a long time to find words for. What Tommy said to his father, in the middle of Dodger Stadium with the music restarting around them, was 4 words. "He saw me, Dad. He saw me." It is a small sentence. In the context of a victory tour that would go on to play 98 more shows across North America, gross more than $75 million, and be remembered as one of the defining live events of the decade, the 90 seconds at Dodger Stadium on opening night do not appear in any official account. No press release referenced them. No tour documentary mentioned them. The set list that night was identical to the set lists that followed. The production notes from the crew do not describe the moment. For the public record, it did not happen. It happened. What it revealed about Michael Jackson was not something new. It was something old, something that had been present in him since the first nights on stage as a child, when he had understood, before he had language for it, that a crowd was not a single thing, that it was made of people, that a performance was not directed at a mass, but at each individual component of that mass simultaneously, that the job, the actual job, not the spectacle of it, but the essential human transaction at its center, was to find someone in the room and make them feel found. At 56,000, that was not supposed to be possible. The mathematics of a stadium show argue against it. The lights, the distance, the production, the choreography, all of it creates a condition in which the performer becomes a figure rather than a person, a spectacle rather than a presence. Michael Jackson spent his entire career resisting that condition, not loudly, not as a statement, simply by continuing to look. Tommy Reeves is in his late 40s now. He has been asked about that night many times over the years. He gives the same answer each time. Not about what Michael said, not about the production or the set list or the things that happened for the remaining 2 hours of the show. He gives the answer his 8-year-old self gave his father in the stadium, while the band was coming back in and the lights were moving, and 56,000 people were watching something that only 2 or 3 of them fully understood. He saw me. That is what Michael Jackson did on the opening night of the largest tour of his family's career. Not for the cameras, not for the record. In a stadium built to make individuals invisible, he found one and told him, without a microphone, without a spotlight, in a crouch at the edge of a stage, that he was visible. That the thing he had been doing in his living room for 3 months was real. That someone with the largest audience on the planet had looked out at all of it and found, in the middle of it, him. There were 56,000 people in Dodger Stadium that night. Michael Jackson was watching one of them. And for 90 seconds on opening night, that was the only number that mattered.